rallying call for us all to unite, comrades. Good morning from the far east of the world that is joining us. Good afternoon, comrades. Good day, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us for our second webinar, that is the build up to the African Social Movement Baraza next month in Accra, Ghana. With a fantastic and very necessary call on building the power of movements. Good afternoon, good day. Comrades, we are excited to see so many people responding to the call, the invitation to participate today. And just as a way to remind us of a beautiful first webinar on the 5th of March, where we had comrades raising issues around really what are the burning struggles that we are waging, what are the issues that we need to be discussing, why this moment is particularly important. One, to celebrate the existence of movements, old and new, to be challenged by new thinking and forgetting old ways, but also to think about what are the critical issues that are facing us as organizations, as movements across this continent. Comrades, you will all agree that this moment, in terms of what's going on all over, is particularly critical for us to think about what are the things we need to unlearn, what are the things we need to be thinking about to sharpen our strategies so that we can be relevant for the struggles that we need to wage from now onwards. We cannot just think about this year or next year. We have to think about long-term strategies that will sustain the political goals of why we exist as movements. So thank you so much, comrades, for joining us. We have a fantastic lineup of friends, activists, and comrades who are doing amazing work, both locally and continentally, who will also be part of our gathering in Accra, but who we hope that can bring a particular richness in relation to what we hope this webinar will be. We want to encourage you to remain engaged in this conversation, to remain engaged in what is on the socials, to register and to participate and to come and contribute. We want to hear from everybody what you are cooking, how you are cooking it, how is it working, how can we learn from you? And we want to also be able to showcase the beautiful things that keep us alive and with so much joy and recommitting to doing movement work wherever we are. As you know, my co-conspirator, Comrade Briggs, is working with me today as we hold the space for everyone to participate. Comrade Briggs.
Oh, thank you so much, Fumi. I see you can hear me. I am just going to stand on the foundation that you have built and not say much before we bring in our illustrious panel for today. I wanted to just reiterate the message that we carried in the last webinar to say that we are meeting at a pivotal moment that demands not only a bold vision or bold visions for just futures, but also collective action. We have always known the work of movements to be vital, but today our work is not only vital, it is historic. I said in our last webinar that we are called upon to be architects of the future. So our organizing today is not only about resistance, it's also about reimagination. And at Trust Africa, we like to say it's about shaping the future. And those who remember the words of Martin Luther King, he taught us that the future will not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. We have to create it. So thank you for being part of this journey. We are very excited to be working together because it's going to require our unity, as Bob Marley was just reminding us as we were connecting into the webinar. So please be aware that there is French and English translation, just like last time. So you should not have any challenges connecting. Before we bring in our panel, I wanted us to just take a moment of silence to acknowledge and respect a dear sister that we lost, and we were laying to rest just these last few days, this past week. And I know Pumi is one of those who was continuously holding the space and holding the fort for all of us who have been part of the Pan-African and feminist movements, as we were accompanying our dear sister Eva Joyce Wynne on her final journey. So I'd really like us to just take a moment to respect her and to honor her work. She was one of the keynote speakers at the African Social Movements Baraza that we organized in Johannesburg. And she was already not feeling well at that point in 2022. And I think it's appropriate that we just give her a moment of silence. Yes, this is for you, our sister, our comrade, our teacher, a feminist par excellence, Eva Joyce Wynne. You will live on through every struggle that we fight and continue. You did your part, you fought the fight. We've got the watch from here onwards. Thank you all for the love and solidarity. So we are going to move right to our panel. What we are really inviting colleagues to do is to already give us a taster of some of the discussions that we are going to be having at the Baraza. Give us a sense of the conversations that we're going to be having, the key issues, the questions that we are holding. And for our panelists, we are simply asking them to share with us, share with the webinar who they are, what movement or protest they've organized with, what are some of the critical insights that emerged from their organizing, but also speak to the importance of all of us seizing the opportunity to connect our movements, connect our energy, connect our visions at this particular moment, which is what the Baraza is seeking to do. And to open the discussions, I would want to go to our sister Hanifa. I had the opportunity to listen to you, Hanifa, share some of your experience when you were organizing as part of the what got popularly known as the Gen Z movement in Kenya, when you were all fighting against the finance bill. And not just myself, but a lot of us who were listening to you and watching what was happening. We were really inspired by what we saw in terms of what you were able to do from being a journalist, but also in terms of the way that you were able to mobilize resources and support for the movements. And we're also quite alive to some of the attacks that you had to bear with as you were part of this organizing. So if you could please just share with us who you are, the work that you do, and most importantly, your experience organizing as part of the Gen Z movements, and what you were able to do during that time that can help give insights to our quest right now to ignite the power of movements. So Hanifa, over to you. Hello. All right, I can come back to Hanifa in a little bit.
Namatai from WELEAD. Are you here, comrade? All right, Ketsia is here.
Yeah.
Ketsia.
Hello everyone. Bonjour. Bonjour à tous.
Bonjour, Ketsia. Bienvenue. Please introduce yourself, comrade, and then please also share the struggles that you are waging in Senegal, but also more how you feel like the baraza is important, not only for what you are doing in Senegal, but also how all of us can learn from that struggle and how this will
In the DRC,
in the
yeah.
DRC, in the DRC. Sorry, that's Tidiane. In the DRC, comrade. Over to you.
Déjà, excusez-moi, je vais parler en français et je ne peux pas allumer mon écran. Ce matin, j'ai eu un petit problème de santé et ma situation actuelle ne me permet pas de vraiment beaucoup parler parce que j'ai très mal à la gorge. Moi, je suis Ketsia Onema, je suis activiste climat. Je vis à Kinshasa, en République démocratique du Congo, et je dirige le mouvement et l'association qui s'appelle Fanya, qui travaille en fait sur la lutte contre le changement climatique et l'engagement citoyen. Et pour répondre à votre deuxième question sur comment je pense que l'événement Baraza peut être bénéfique pour tout le monde, c'est que parce qu'on a besoin aujourd'hui qu'il y ait cette connexion entre ce qui est fait en RDC et ce qui est fait dans le monde. Vous savez ce qui se passe dans mon pays aujourd'hui, à l'est de mon pays, qui est marqué par une grande violence et une guerre entre les rebelles du M23 et le FRDC, qui est l'armée congolaise, et qui, depuis plus d'un mois, on parle dans tous les réseaux et dans tous les médias de l'occupation de 2 principales villes et de plusieurs autres zones de la RDC par les rebelles du M23. On a remarqué, on a pu constater un tas de pillages et beaucoup de revendications et de manifestations, et cette espèce de haine qui commence à naître dans le cœur des Congolais. Ça, c'est des choses qui m'ont beaucoup fait réfléchir, mais il n'y a pas que le conflit armé dans mon pays, par exemple. Il y a aussi le fait que la RDC soit considérée comme le 2e poumon du monde et que malheureusement la RDC est vraiment confrontée aux effets du changement climatique, et il est parmi les 33 pays à haut risque d'exposition des enfants et des jeunes face aux effets du changement climatique. En 2 ans, on a perdu 481 000 hectares de forêt, et les effets du changement climatique, comme par exemple les inondations qu'il y a eu en décembre 2023, qui ont emporté énormément de quartiers et de villages ainsi que de villes en République démocratique du Congo. On a aussi les problèmes de gouvernance ou encore la situation socio-économique qui nous a poussé à nous engager. Au départ, moi, je me suis engagée quand j'avais 12 ans, quand j'ai commencé mon engagement. Au départ, c'était pour la promotion et la protection des droits de l'enfant. Je ne l'ai pas fait parce que je voulais vraiment le faire. Au départ, c'était juste ce sentiment d'abandon où je me dis, mais comment je fais? Pourquoi ça ne va pas? Pourquoi les choses ne marchent pas? Pourquoi j'ai l'impression qu'on n'est pas écouté? Pourquoi il y a autant d'inégalités entre nous alors qu'on vit dans le même pays et qu'on doit tous bénéficier des mêmes droits? Pourquoi il y en a qui en ont beaucoup et que ceux qui sont pauvres continuent d'être de plus en plus pauvres? Et c'est toutes ces questions qui ont suscité en moi cet engagement. Aujourd'hui, au fil des années, en République démocratique du Congo, par exemple, il n'y a plus de confiance entre les décideurs et la population, notamment les jeunes. On se rend compte qu'on ne parle pas le même langage qu'eux et leurs murs sont trop hauts. Ils ne vivent pas les mêmes réalités que nous. Et en fait, on n'a pas de choix. On va se dire, mais il faut que je fasse quelque chose. J'étais très jeune, à 12 ans. Tout ce que je voulais au départ, c'était que les choses soient meilleures, et j'ai commencé à utiliser ma voix pour ça. Et très vite, ma voix a été soutenue par ma communauté qui, malheureusement, des fois, on a envie de s'engager, mais on ne connaît pas comment faire. On n'a pas les bons réseaux. On n'a pas les connaissances qu'il faut. On ne sait pas par où commencer. Et je pense que c'est pour ça aussi que des événements comme ça sont très, très importants. Mais vous savez, quand on décide d'avoir un engagement et qu'on décide de pouvoir mener un combat pour sa communauté, pour ses droits, pour son bien-être, bah, il va falloir nourrir ce combat. Et pour ma part, j'ai décidé de commencer à étudier des mouvements qui existaient déjà. Et je suis partie sur le mouvement Y en a marre, un mouvement sénégalais, d'ailleurs, qui a eu énormément d'impact en Afrique. Je me suis rendu compte qu'il a fallu que je nourrisse mon combat, que je lui apporte de quoi avoir de la force de tenir. Et pour cela, il a fallu que j'ai d'abord la force du nombre. Ensuite, il a fallu que je me nourrisse des expériences passées d'autres mouvements. Et il a aussi fallu que j'utilise l'art et la tradition, la culture au service du combat que je me suis fixé dans la protection de l'environnement et dans l'engagement citoyen. Et je pense que c'est pour ça que des mouvements comme celui-ci sont importants et des événements comme celui-ci sont importants, parce que ça va nous permettre de nourrir notre désir de faire changer les choses. On va pouvoir s'inspirer, on va pouvoir apprendre comment ça marche, comment ça se fait. J'avais encore 12 ans, aujourd'hui j'ai 21 ans, j'apprends beaucoup mieux, mais je pense que grâce à vous et à ce genre d'événements, à ce webinaire et les histoires, les parcours d'autres militants à travers l'Afrique vont me permettre à moi de mieux peaufiner mon combat et de mieux le définir encore, mais aussi de pousser d'autres jeunes, au-delà de Ketsia et de son mouvement, de pouvoir s'engager. Je pense que c'est très important d'offrir ce cadre de partage parce qu'au-delà de nos pays, au-delà des frontières qui nous sont imposées, on a les mêmes problèmes et on a les mêmes désirs de faire en sorte que les choses aillent beaucoup mieux en Afrique. Et on a compris malheureusement la jeunesse, par exemple dans le cas de mon pays, on est 60% de la population qui a moins de 24 ans et on a compris qu'il n'y a personne d'autre qui va porter ce combat mieux que nous-mêmes. Personne d'autre ne va porter le fardeau de notre avenir mieux que la RDC, mieux que la jeunesse de la RDC et que la jeunesse de l'Afrique. Et je pense que c'est pour ça qu'il faut qu'il y ait plus d'événements comme celui-ci qui va nous mettre en réseau, qui vont nous permettre à nous de pouvoir rencontrer d'autres jeunes, de nous inspirer de leur combat et de nous nourrir. Et en même temps, ça va nous donner la force de pouvoir continuer. Et en fait, la force du nombre va pousser nos actions à prendre de plus en plus d'ampleur.
Ketsia, it's so beautiful. Merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. I am so encouraged. The future is bright from the way in which you present about interlinking, living in conflict-stricken country, the issues on climate, children, and young organizing, the youth. But also you lifted an important point about how much mistrust that exists. Some of the difficult issues that in movement work, we don't create space to talk about. Thank you so much, Ketsia, for everything that you've shared. I'm sure you'll come back again to speak. I'm going to go back to Briggs to
Thank you
start
so
again.
much. Thank you so much, Pumi. Not only is the future bright, it is young. It's possible that Ketsia is the youngest voice on this webinar today. And yeah, thank you for just bringing it in at that very inspiring level. I understand.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I understand Hanifa is here now. Hanifa, please confirm if you can hear me.
Hi, I can hear you. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize. I was having trouble with the Zoom. Thank you.
Not to worry, not to worry, you are on time. So, Hanifa, I had shared with colleagues that we have on the webinar that I did have an opportunity to listen to you speak before and was really inspired and moved by what you had to share in terms of your experience being part of what got to be popularly known as the Gen Z movement, as you were all fighting against the finance bill. And would like to invite you to just share with colleagues who are on the webinar who you are and your experience organizing as part of the movement to stop the finance bill in Kenya. I specifically also wanted to flag the incredible success that you're organizing yourself and other colleagues had in terms of mobilizing alternative resourcing for your movements. So you were able to move the movement before what are known as, traditional funders could show up for that movement. But also, if you could even share some of then the challenges that came your way as you were part of this glorious movement. So over to you, Hanifa.
Thank you so much. I have a lot to say. By the way, can you confirm if you can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So, the Gen Z movement started as something none of us anticipated, honestly. Unlike other movement and struggles, people usually strategize, have a sit down and organize. People first organize and do everything, but for us, we just found ourselves right in the middle of everything. I found myself in the middle of everything that was happening. It honestly just started as people were being made aware of this finance bill, the Finance Bill 2024. It included punitive taxes and proposals meant to harm the common people, meant to harm people who had no voice and power. So we started educating people. People started educating each other on TikTok, on Twitter. Everywhere you'd see people are talking about the finance bill. People are told to be aware of what it is this has in store for us as Kenyans and as common citizens. So the education started, the civic education on the finance bill started, and everyone was shaking because they were taxing ordinary things like even cancer patients are going to be affected. So the finance bill really hit literally everyone on the spot. And there's something that I think people tend to forget about this movement and how it started. There's a culture called kusalimia. It's now a culture for us. There's something called kusalimia, basically means greetings. So we started greeting our member of parliament and telling them to reject the finance bill. We were telling them to represent our interests and reject the finance bill because they tend to represent their own interests most of the time and their bosses. So everyone was telling their member of parliament to represent their interest. So, sorry, someone is saying they can't hear me. Am I loud enough?
We can hear you very clearly. So please check your connections
Oh,
on that end. But yeah, you are very clear.
okay, thank you. So we started I started taking the numbers and combining them, the numbers of the members of parliament, and posted it online. So it went viral. Everyone was texting their members of parliament, telling them to reject the finance bill, reject the finance bill, reject the finance bill. So, sorry, I'm trying to be loud enough. Yeah, everyone was telling their members of parliament to reject the finance bill, and that is where it officially started. So we said we can take this to the streets. We can make our voice louder than this. And people started contributing for T-shirts, for this and that, for water, for placards, and I was in charge of the T-shirts the first day. When the first day of protest came, I had the printed T-shirts. So, like I said, none of this was organized. We were totally disorganized. Totally, we were just saying we are leaderless. We are tribeless. We are we were just totally not organized at all. And I told people we should meet at a particular place in the CBD, and we met. But immediately I alighted from the Uber. The police came at me. he really came at me aggressively. He came at me aggressively, took away my T-shirts, manhandled me, and arrested me. So I was the first protester to be arrested. We were actually we were 3 people who were arrested. They were with me. I think the rest managed to get away. So we were actually just starting. So they arrested me. Their intention was to instill fear in people so that they don't come to the streets. But it actually went the opposite way. People took that as a as a challenge. People were challenged. They wanted to silence the dissent so much, but people really, really came out after that. So from that day on and up to where we are right now, it sparked something in each and every one of us. I was arrested after much online noise. I was released, and then I waited for the rest to be released. We were like over 400 people arrested that day. I was so amazed because I was in a cell with like 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and none of us were silenced. People still continue to sing and sing and sing and sing. So we went on and on after that up to the next protest, which was on 20th June. That was our first massive protest. Thousands and thousands of youths were out there. I was literally crying when we were in the middle of the streets. I was shocked at how many we were. And it was the beginning of an entire generation realizing their power, realizing that, wow, we actually do have this kind of power. And that power was realized to its maximum on 25th June. So you hear about 25th June 2024 a lot in Kenya because it's such a historic day for us. I think there are like 1 million of us in the streets. That's the next election, the next protest after the 20th. So 25th was the height of all protests for us. It was such a historic day for us. We genuinely realized the power of an entire generation and took it. And unfortunately, too, it was such a sad day as well because they shot, maimed, killed so many people. The brutality, the state-sanctioned brutality on that day cannot be ignored as well. I experienced it in funerals, in burials, and in hospitals. So after we saw so many people injured and so many were killed, spearheaded a fundraiser. So we came and I put out a link for people to contribute. I was shocked and overwhelmed because my target was 10 million Kenyan shillings, but in like 3 hours we got 14 million Kenyan shillings. And within a blink of an eye, it was 31 million Kenyan shillings contributed for the people who were in the hospitals and our comrades who had died. So it was a lot of task for me. It wasn't easy handling the money through the Mchanga link. I did that at the expense of my mental well-being and literally at the expense of everything I have, because it was heartening, disheartening, seeing the trails of police brutality everywhere I went. Everywhere I went, there was someone who was amputated, shot and amputated. Someone was shot on the head and his brains were lying there. So the postmortems, everything was hectic. It was so hectic for me. But we knew we didn't leave anyone behind. The motto was not leaving anyone behind at all. So I worked with social workers and community leaders. We verified documents and just clearing bills all around the country attended burials and fund sent money to the families to bury their loved ones, and also at the same time I attend their burials. So for accountability purposes, I did not handle the cash. Rather, the company that was doing the fundraise handled the cash. So they handled the cash. They handled the cash so that we can have a seamless accountability process. What I did was get the cases. My number was public, so people were sending their cases to me, anyone who was injured during the protest and who had died. So they sent their cases to me. I will verify and then send the papers and the account number to the company, to the Mchanga platform. It's called the Mchanga platform, and the Mchanga would send money to hospitals and people who had lost their loved ones. So that is how I was able to account for the 31 million Kenyan shillings. I knew it took the life in me to account for that money, because that is the same thing we are fighting for, accountability. I wanted to prove that it was possible to account for public money. It was possible to use public money and resources well and utilize it to the maximum and for the good of the people. I'm happy people are doing research papers about the Mchanga and how we were able to do that. So it took, I'm not even joking, it took the life in me. It took the life in me to genuinely pull off that Mchanga challenge, and I'm glad I did. I cried for like an hour after I had submitted it. So our movement was successful most of the time, and it still is, because I highly believe in social media advocacy. Like for me, I leverage on my social media platform a lot. I've been able to achieve a lot on social media. So our movement was validated, was successful because of social media. Leveraging on social media has really helped me a lot as a person and as an activist and as a human rights defender. And not only mine did not begin with the Gen Z movement. It started a while back, 4 years ago. I've been an active citizens for 4 years and leveraging on my social media platform. And that is what we are currently doing. And that is what is currently giving the state headaches. The oppressors do not know how to control us on social media. We counter all the propagandas. We are able to do a lot of things through social media, civic education, and every protest that is happening anywhere around. We can see literally everything happening on social media. We are informed. So I think that is a crucial part of this movement and what we currently have in Kenya, and what sparked the movement and how the trajectory of this country politically changed. So there's a lot of challenge, I think, like any other struggles. We have the key figures who move and dine with the oppressors. That is currently our biggest challenge. I don't believe in dialogues. We cannot dine with the oppressors in the name of having a dialogue with them. A dialogue will not solve anything, because our people have been killed and maimed, 70 plus people, and that is the number I had gotten across the country, but I'm sure there's more. They hunted down people who went into parliament on June 25th, one by one, and killed them mercilessly. Bodies were flowing, and in quarries, bodies were found mutilated. There's no dialogue that is ever going to fix the mess that we are currently in and the brutality. No dialogue is ever going to fix the state-sanctioned brutality. So one of the challenges is the key figures dining with the oppressors in the name of dialogue and youth inclusivity. You cannot talk about youth inclusivity when you've brutally murdered the nation's brave youths. There's no dialogue for us and for me. And the other challenge would be, I think, me being a woman and being so loud and at the center of everything, I get trolled a lot online. So one of the challenges of leveraging on social media activism is getting trolled. But I think I've done well all those couple of months. I never want to be a victim or seen as a victim. I usually fight back or ignore and let time vindicate everything and everyone. So you rise past the bullies and trolls and the state-hired machineries. The state-hired propaganda has been after me because they couldn't dine with me. They could not try. They tried to reach out to me and I shut them down disgustingly. So what was left for them was to run a propaganda machine against me. They said I was pregnant. They said I did this and that. They said a lot of things. But you just have to know who you are and what you stand for and keep moving and soldiering on because there's still a lot to do. And also another challenge is organizing. We are currently left in the mobilization stage. We have not been able to consolidate well or morph into the organization stage because as a leaderless movement, anyone who tries to come up with solution or try to organize for something is seen as someone who is trying to, leveraging on the movement to their self-interest, which is not the case most of the time. So being a leaderless movement has its challenges as well. So I have a lot to say, but for the sake of time, I think that would do. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanifa. Thank you for trusting us with your pain. It's ours to hold. Your resilience is ours to amplify. Your comrades did not die in vain, same as comrades that we've lost in many other struggles. It's our conviction that there are seeds for the future that we are collectively working to bring. Thank you so much. I heard you when you said that this was a moment when for the first time you all realized the power that you had as a generation and you took it. Thank you. I would really want to invite, if there is anyone on the call who has brief words just to acknowledge the depth of what you have shared with us. I'm just opening. Please open your microphone and in a few words, just help give thanks to what our sister has shared.
Yes, it's me. Yeah, Doug Coltart from Zimbabwe. Hanifa, thank you so much for your really powerful testimony. Thank you for all that you and the many brave Kenyans have done, not just for your country, but for, I think, an entire continent. I think I speak for many others that we were deeply inspired and continue to be deeply inspired by your bravery, your commitment to justice and nonviolence and a brighter future for our continent. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. Can I go back to you, Pumi?
Absolutely. So inspiring. So much depth in the experience that really moved us, not only from last year, but so many lessons for all of us. But at this moment, we are holding you, Hanifa, and many of your comrades, And we know that the state-sponsored brutality continues even to this day. And one of the big questions we continue to sit with is how do we show up for the resistance that you are doing inside of the borders of Kenya? So I think we will move on to Namatai. Namatai, the co-founder or founder, leading director of WELEAD Trust, based in Zimbabwe. My sister would like to invite you to share, amongst other things, how you advance the fight against ageist inequality and patriarchy, where you organize. But please introduce yourself a bit and share with us your work and what you hope the Baraza invites in this particular moment.
So thank you so much to the previous speakers. Hanifa, thank you so much. Very inspiring. I am definitely one of those people who is inspired by young people in Kenya. So today I wanted just to talk about an issue that has been on my chest and my heart, the issue around Zimbabwe, and particularly the levels of, deep brokenness and the levels of deep demobilization, but also the issues around where the hope lies in all of this. I was having a conversation with a couple of friends of mine, and I was telling them that, in Mozambique recently, they had an election. And in that election, Frelimo rigged the election. And the people of Mozambique spent, 3-4 months protesting. When they could not go into the streets, they were protesting with pots and pans. They would protest in their houses. Literally, they shut the country down because they were not happy with the rigging of elections. We had a similar election rigging in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabweans pretty much did nothing. They stayed in their houses and it was business as usual. We look at the Kenyan situation where taxes were increased by Ruto, the notorious Ruto. And when these taxes were increased, we have had it from a young Kenyan, a young, brave Kenyan, what they did. They mobilized, they were angry, they organized. And because of their actions, Ruto was forced literally to backtrack. I remember Ruto having a Twitter space in which he wanted to talk to young people. And then they started talking about how they would cut all these hefty benefits for senior government officials. And my thinking was, why didn't he just cut all those hefty benefits for senior government officials before young people were killed, before young people were found floating in rivers, before young people were disappeared and abducted in Kenya? So it is a clear indication that these leaders do have alternatives and they do have solutions to improving the socioeconomic conditions of everyday ordinary, but they are unwilling to actually do it unless they've been put in a corner. Now, I'll bring you back to Zimbabwe. We have had taxes increased. Mutuli Ngube, our finance minister, has been increasing taxes every now and again. Initially, when they came in 2017, it was austerity for prosperity, and those taxes have been increased. And the response from a young Zimbabwean has been completely different from the response that we are seeing from a young Kenyan. And now the critical question is, what exactly is happening in Zimbabwe that has resulted in young people being so disengaged and young people, of course, you do have pockets where young people are engaging. There are pockets of hope, pockets of democracy. Now, I will talk about that at the very end because that is my hope. But that level of mass organizing, mass mobilization is something that we're not seeing anymore. And there's a backstory, there's a history to that. There's a history to that. And that's what I want to share first. And then I quickly go into my hopes and my beliefs and my aspirations. When you move in the streets of Harare and you look at the faces of men and women, there's a deep brokenness. And it is a deep brokenness that is emanating from a system that has a strong commitment to manufacture human misery and to manufacture poverty. What the system has done in Zimbabwe is to create a fear machine. The last time that we had mass protests in Zimbabwe was in January of 2019. And when I tell you that these people really descended on the ordinary citizenry, they went all out. Everything from internet shutdowns to soldiers raping women. I know, especially in Hopely, there were stories about that. To issues around people being brutally beaten up. It was a thorough beating. It was vicious. It was violent. And there are so many stories that were never even documented. I remember soon after the rape issues were raised by the international community after January 2019. I remember very clearly the president going on live television and saying, the women who were raped, where are they? We are looking for them. And it was so vicious and violent that even if you had been raped at the time, you would not be forthcoming. This was the last time that we saw mass organizing at that level. And the response and the reaction was brutal. So we understand that there is a fear machine that has been created, that has been running. And what it operates on is issues around surveillance, particularly human surveillance. There has been an increase in human surveillance in Zimbabwe. Demobilization, and particularly demobilization, is not only the system that does it. Demobilization is coming in also from the opposition. Demobilization is coming in from civil society groups who want to engage the government. And I recently posted on Twitter that some people in civil society have strong interest to join government and are busy demobilizing people in civil society because they don't want to seem too radical, such that it ruins their prospects. We've also experienced demobilization even from communities, in which families are literally telling their children, "Munofira mahara, you will die for nothing," because our parents are now unwilling to release us for the struggle because countless times and countless occasions they have been disappointed. And there is now low trust in which the community itself will facilitate demobilization. There has also been brutality. And this brutality is systemic, it is structural, but it is also within the judiciary. Nowadays, if you so much in Zimbabwe as think about organizing a protest, if you so much as organize a gathering, the system does descend on you. And I think a classic example is James Timber, the senator from the opposition, who literally spent 6 months in prison after there was a thorough beating. And I remember when I was in prison and I met some of the women who were arrested with James Timber, they told me how their skin was turning green, yellow, purple, red. The first few days they got to prison after they had had a thorough beating from the police. One woman who I slept next to literally had her leg broken by a button stick. So anytime you think about gathering, this is how vicious the system is responding. So there has been all of these issues which have developed, and I think a major issue which will be linked to what I think must happen in Zimbabwe to also see what is happening in Kenya and in Mozambique is this issue around the deep psychological operation that the state in Zimbabwe has been currently imploring on its citizens. Psychological operations, what you know as PsyOps, are basically structured around shaping the psyche of a population. And this involves using distractions, it involves using disinformation and misinformation, which the ZANU-PF state, sorry, the ZANU-PF government, because ZANU-PF is not a state, has been literally using, especially on young people who are quite impressionable. And unfortunately, we've not had the same level of a movement of consciousness happening, from NGOs, from activists, to also build consciousness amongst young Zimbabweans. The distractions are happening on social media. We have a strong culture of what we call mbingas. These are socialites. I know in South Africa they call them ice boys, who are basically people that are looting our public funds. They're looting our wealth as a country. And then they spend it in Dubai, they spend it in lavish lifestyles, and then they splash that on social media. And what is unfortunate is that it has led to a culture of glorifying corruption. It has led to a culture of young people thinking that this is the way, and it has destroyed our belief in the Zimbabwean promise, which was the promise that if you were willing to work hard, even if you had no connections, even if you, were not politically connected, you would make a good life. You would have a dignified life. So that amalgamated with the context of the poverty, the extreme poverty, that amalgamated with the economic despair that we have in Zimbabwe, where things have fallen to a very low point for a lot of people economically. People now admire and glorify people that have lifestyles that they can only dream of without actually questioning how these people are getting these lifestyles. And most of these are cronies and front runners for the first family and for the political elites. Disinformation has also come in from the system itself to make activists look bad. Things like they are puppets of the West, they are sponsored, they are paid, they have been given money. Things like, I remember when I was arrested, people would take the ugliest pictures of you and it would, spread this narrative that the system will break you, the system will do this to you once they have you, such that other young people don't want to participate. And again, this notion of monofira mahara, you die for nothing. It's something that the system is always saying to young people. So this is the consolidation of the current atmosphere that we find in Zimbabwe, in which young people would opt to be distracted with humor and jokes and socialites and social media instead of confronting the problems. Young people are glorifying corruption and asking themselves, how can we be involved in the corruption? So that us ourselves, we can benefit. I was laughing at one of these Mbingas who recently married his wife, Whitney Chivayo, for about 300 or so thousand US dollars. And you see young people on social media glorifying that. They are thousands and thousands of views of people going there to like and to celebrate that. But these people literally are financing that lavish lifestyle using the money that they stole from citizens. And it is unfortunate that for the young generation, they are no longer angry enough to go and demand that these people return the stolen loot and to go and demand that these people are imprisoned. So where is the hope? Where is the hope? Because I don't want to talk about the deep brokenness. I want to talk about what must happen for that culture of apathy, for that culture of looking away when things are going crazy in Zimbabwe to actually change. What must happen in Zimbabwe for what happened in Kenya and what happened in Mozambique to also come to Zimbabwe? So the first thing that we have to understand is that the major difference between a young person in Kenya and a young person in Zimbabwe is simply their psychology. It is what they think. It is the level of consciousness. Young people in Kenya and in Mozambique at this particular moment are very conscious. In Zimbabwe, it might be a little bit different. And I think the major reason is that in the past, we had so much more infrastructure that was built to spread civic and political education. So this is where we need to start. Spreading civic and political education. There have to be mass programs in Zimbabwe that are spreading civic and political education, because clearly there was something that was happening in the mind of a young Kenyan when Ruto increased taxes that compelled them to say, hey, that tax increase will affect me. That is something that will affect me and I need to act. But when Mthuli Ncube is increasing taxes in Zimbabwe, that thing that is happening in the mind of a young Kenyan is not happening in the mind of a young Zimbabwean. That connection, that symbiotic connection between the increase of taxes and the hardship I will experience at a very personal level is not happening in Zimbabwe. And that can only happen when there is a high level of civic and political education, where I can see that 2% increase in tax affecting what I eat, affecting where I go to school, affecting the ability of my parents to provide decency for me. And that can only happen when we increase civic and political education to build consciousness. And this is the first step, mass civic and political education. We must be relentless. The second thing is to motivate young people to stay in Zimbabwe. I was very disheartened when a popular journalist in our country was encouraging people to leave the country. Leave and go where? Abroad is messed up. The United States is messed up. When you hear the stories of Zimbabweans who went to the United Kingdom, they're struggling. when I've been in South Africa and I'm talking to the many Zimbabweans that I meet, they'll tell you, yeah, it's a little bit better because we get money here and there, but if we could go home, we would want to go home. So abroad is messed up. And I think the motivation is to deal with the migration issue. Because for us to build a critical mass, we need a critical number of young people within the country who are willing to actually act to challenge the government. The next thing that we have to do is to build solidarity across the board. Young people in the army, I was listening to this political character called Geza, who was talking about the experiences of a junior soldier in the army in Zimbabwe. These are young people. They are suffering. They are living in squalid, impoverished conditions. When you think about a young nurse, when you think about a young doctor, when you think about a young person in the education system, when you think about a young people who's vending in the streets, our conditions are pretty much the same, and yet there is no across-the-board organizing and solidarity. And this is something that we have to build, through interface, through interaction, until we realize that we have a common enemy. Whether you are a young person in the military, whether you're a young person who is a doctor or a nurse, whether you're a young person in the education system, whether a young person who is a vendor, our enemy is the same. So we need to build solidarity across the board, and to build it by connecting the symbiotic relationship between our poverty, between our squalid conditions, and our lack of dignity that is being created by the state. The final few points that I wanted to say in terms of building social movements in Zimbabwe is creativity. We cannot do organizing the way it was done in the past. The system has already learned that. We have to be a bit more creative and unpredictable in our dealings and in our doings. I like the idea of having leaderless movements, because it makes it harder to corrupt the movement, but also rethinking how we finance those movements, given that development agencies like USAID have pulled out, which can be an opportunity for social movements to actually organize. There has to be community resourcing, there has to be community ownership, and there also has to be community solidarity. The idea that when Namatai or James Timber or Blessed Mhlanga is arrested, and then it is said, that's the responsibility of civil society organizations to deal with it. What happened to the mother selling tomatoes at the corner of the street, going to the police station to demand the whereabouts of those people who've been abducted? What happened to the young man who sells airtime on the corner of the street, who knows Namatai buys airtime from me every day in the morning when she goes to work, going to the police to demand the whereabouts of those who've been abducted? So it is like the community has completely retired the responsibility to act on a bunch of civil society organizations without them taking any ownership. So we need to go back to basics to allow the community to have a place and to center whatever organizing we're doing on the community, having responsibility and ownership. The last 3 points I will hammer on are, we need to also safeguard our movements to prevent being hijacked. The military in Zimbabwe is very crafty. They will front you and they will use your movements when they have other agendas. And I think one of the most classic instances that we are seeing that power play happening is particularly with the third term, because our president wants a third term. And there were a lot of people within the military who were advocating against that. And for the first time, I had a war veteran, Blessed Geza, talk about the arrest of Job Sikala, talk about the arrest of Blessed Mhlanga, talk about the arrest of James Timber. And my thinking is, why now? Right? People have been arrested for the longest of times. People have been abducted, tortured, and those people would keep quiet because they were comfortable within the system. But the moment that they have their own intrinsic factional issues, they want to come into our movements, into our experiences, to try and build solidarity with us, to try and fit themselves in and to hijack us into things that we have absolutely no understanding of. The unfortunate reality is we know this playbook. This was the same playbook that was used when Mugabe was taken out, where we had to march in 2017, only for the military to pop up and say, this is our thing. And the people were put aside. So we also need to be careful about that. The second from last point, before I get to the last point, is harvesting the pockets of democracy. So it's not like because young people are not mass mobilizing and mass organizing in Zimbabwe, it's not like they're not organizing. I read an amazing paper by a German scholar called Thilo Schuner from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. And he talks about these pockets of democracy that he sees in Zimbabwe and across Africa. where in highly repressive environments like we find in Zimbabwe, people will resort to getting into these small pockets, of organizing. So there are places and spaces where conversations about democracy are still happening. There are places where people are still organizing and still connecting. And the fundamental political question and social question of the moment is, how are we going to connect all of these individuals? And I believe that the future of what social movements in Zimbabwe will look like will not come from traditional movements. It has to come organically from unusual places, particularly because the traditional movements are so easy to be corrupted and the government understands them very well. The last thing that I will mention is we need to create the necessary conditions. So my whole entire presentation today was exactly about that. How can we create the necessary conditions for people to push back? How can we create the necessary conditions for a young Zimbabwean to say enough is enough? It's a do or die. How can we create the necessary conditions for a young Zimbabwean to have that symbiotic connection, that symbiotic understanding of how not having doctors and nurses working in the hospitals affects them at a deeply personal level? How can we appeal to the part of who they are that speaks into their anger against the system, that says that we cannot speak to them politely anymore because they're going hard on us? We cannot be told that we must engage them and tiptoe around them because if you are too violent and too hostile, mind you, we are always going against violence and we believe in nonviolent movements. But this idea of framing how the poor and the oppressed must respond, this idea of telling us that you can only respond this way, all of those things are things we must challenge. All of those are things that we must work against because we are the ones who are experiencing what we're experiencing. We are the ones who know what it is like to live in a country where you do not have water, electricity, where there are no nurses and doctors in the hospitals. So there must be a point where we are able to create the necessary conditions that allow the young Zimbabwean to say enough is enough. This is what I believe we can do to rebuild our belief and our vibrancy and our faith in social movements until we defeat oppression, until those who have been oppressing us feel the political, social, and economic cost of running tyrannical regimes. I will stop here for now. Thank you.
Powerful, Sister Namatai. Thank you so much. The thought of how many of us, not only in Zim, but in so many other spaces, but the way you beautifully put it in terms of moving from brokenness and demobilization to actually think about the role of building consciousness around why the conditions are such that people want to leave a country, a home, a place. You put forward a lot of points on that hope, on solidarity, on creativity, safeguarding our movements from being hijacked, harnessing all those beliefs that we rallied around post colonization, on building democracies. But yes, we need to build the conditions. And the questions remain, how are we going to do that together? How are we going to see what's necessary within borders, but also across the continent? Thank you so much, Namatai, for offering very important and valuable analysis and reflections and questions that will be part of our discussions as we think about how we understand what is necessary for our beautiful continent and beyond. Comrade Briggs.
Thank you, Pumi, and thank you, Namatai. I wanted to say Namatai is one of those activists who were arrested last year on their way to the African Philanthropy Conference in Victoria Falls. And I know there was a lot of attention when this happened. What maybe most of the comrades who are on the call will not know is that Namatai and the colleagues that she was arrested with continue to have to report to various police stations after every so often. and they also have to continue appearing before the courts. And this is something that can be stretched for even a year or even longer. So there are so many ways in which activism is being criminalized, and activists are turned into endangered species in a sense. So we salute your courage in continuing to be a voice for a just future, even under such very difficult circumstances. Thank you very much for that. You said something about building consciousness so that young people can say enough is enough. So this is a perfect segue for me to bring in Yenama. Yenama actually means that's enough. So it resonates with the point that was made by Namatai. Would like to invite our comrade Tidiane from Senegal to just share a little bit about their organizing as Yenama. This is not a new movement. It's a movement we have known since the time that Abdoulaye Wade was trying to extend his stay in power. And we knew of the creativity that they were bringing in, the work they were doing in communities, but we also saw them still being very relevant and continuing to fight as recent as a year ago when Macky Sall, this time, who had been brought into power on the back of the success of the organizing that movements like Yenama were doing, was also now trying to extend his stay in power. And it was not an easy walk in the park. We know that a lot of young people died in those protests of defending democracy in Senegal. But there's something I think that we can all learn from the fact that Yenama has existed for such a long time and continue to exist and continue to be relevant. So Tidiane, please, if you can come in and speak to the comrades. Over to you.
Bonjour tout le monde, c'est Tidiane du mouvement Y'en a marre. Voilà. Donc, je salue tout le monde, tous les participants. Et pour revenir à la discussion, en écoutant les différents récits, j'ai eu l'impression que nous vivons approximativement. Ok. Donc, je disais, en écoutant les récits des différents participants, je suis déjà très touché par ce dont ils ont parlé et Namatai récemment. Et j'ai comme l'impression que nous vivons approximativement les mêmes réalités en Afrique. Et sur ce point, j'encourage vivement mes frères et sœurs militants de redoubler d'efforts afin de conscientiser la jeunesse de leur pays pour faire changer et bouger les choses. Je suis de ceux qui pensent que les mouvements sociaux éclairés et bien structurés pourraient faire reculer le clientélisme politique et inciter les gouvernants à mieux gérer l'État dans le sens de la bonne gouvernance et de l'intérêt des populations. Les organisations citoyennes que nous sommes suscitent beaucoup d'enthousiasme en général dans nos pays et en dehors. Voilà. Par rapport au mouvement Y'en a marre, c'est un mouvement qui existe depuis, je vais dire, 2011, voilà, qui a été créé par des artistes, des journalistes et certains étudiants. C'est
All right. It seems like we are going to need a little bit more time to reconnect to Diane. I would like to move us to Wanjira. Wanjira, please, can you confirm if you can hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, fantastic. We can hear you loud and clear. So we would like to hear your own voice, your own story, Wanjira. There's a lot that has already been shared, including from your fellow country sister, Hanifa earlier, regarding the harsh Stop the Finance Bill protest. But we also know a lot, and we were seeing a lot of the organizing that was happening in Mathare, even before these recent protests. So over to you. What can you share with us?
Thank you so much, my brother, and Pan-African greetings to all of you, my African brothers and sisters. Hanifa, your presentation was so inspiring, and we appreciate you very much here in Kenya. We're so lucky to have you as part of our struggle for a better country and a better continent. I will speak about Mathare Social Justice Center. Namatai, also, I really loved listening to you and all your insights about Mozambique and what's happening in Zimbabwe. And just listening to how passionate we are about change gives me a lot of hope. Sometimes it's really good to be together and listen to like-minded people to just keep your fire burning, because change must come. Change is inevitable. The Mathare Social Justice Center was started in 2015, and it was mainly to challenge the normalization of police brutality that was happening in our country, in our community. Mathare is one of the biggest slums in Kenya. It's the second biggest slum in Kenya, and it's the oldest slum, a century and 2-3 years easier. So there has been a lot of systemic violence in the community over the years. Ever since I was a young girl, I was born and brought up there. Now I'm an adult. Mathare has remained the same, a very poor neighborhood, pathetic housing, lack of water, police brutality, and all of these issues that were happening in Mathare were also happening in other informal settlements. So we came together and started the Mathare Social Justice Center, which inspired our activist friends in other informal settlements to start their own justice centers. And today we have over 85 social justice centers in the country that are all working towards change. Why this is important is because we have been able to bring back the culture of protests in the country. Our first protest was in 2018. It was against extrajudicial killings in all the different neighborhoods that are informal in Kenya. It was a massive protest. And then in every year after that, we have had a protest. And I think it was important to the general Kenyan public to see that we are exercising our sovereign rights as citizens. We are pushing for the implementation of the Kenyan Constitution. Article 37 gives us a right to peaceably and unarmed to protest. And right before the protest of finance bill happened, our community experienced very devastating floods. First of many. We had never experienced floods in Mathare. Those floods we had known, because now at Mathare Social Justice Center, we came up with various campaigns affecting all the different things that were lacking in the community. There was a campaign against extrajudicial killings, which led to the campaign of the Mothers of Victims and Survivors Network, because we would go to every family that had lost a loved one and document. There's a report on our website called Who is Next report. If they're killing us like this, who is going to be killed next? I think this was the first report on extrajudicial killings in Kenya. We documented 801 killings in Mathare, but also at the national level. Every page that was reported, police killed someone, we put it in the report. This birthed the campaign for Mothers of Victims and Survivors Network, which birthed the campaign on ecological justice, which has now created a couple of parks in the community. And Mama Victor, who was spearheading the campaign of Mothers of Victims and Survivors Network, was one of the community members we picked from the Mathare River when floods were happening. The social justice movement came together, went to Mathare. The government completely neglected the people, mishandled this catastrophe, despite having put money aside to handle it. So after the floods, the evictions happened, and then the finance bill came. As Mathare Social Justice Center, we organized a protest against the evictions. We mobilized women in our community. They're called Kenya women. They put on their traditional regalia. and we went to the city center in Nairobi to protest against the finance bill on 18th, because life was going to be even more difficult. Imagine your house has been demolished by the government. You have lost your friends, your neighbors, with the floods, and the finance bill has been introduced. This finance bill was extremely punitive, and in a situation where we're already living in a high cost of living situation. Why Ruto became president was because he lied to the Kenyan people that he was going to make their life more bearable. They were campaigning, saying freedom is coming, which was our language as grassroots human rights defenders. We were pushing and saying freedom is coming. And one day I woke up and saw a billboard with Ruto and his deputy written, freedom is coming. It was freedom from poverty. I'm gonna put it because it's lies. They're saying they're going to liberate us from the high cost of living, from the taxes, from our hard life, and it is going to be a government of the poor. It is going to be a government of Mama Mboga and Boda Boda. So Kenyans were trusting and wanted, the economic burden off their shoulders, and they voted for this duo. I like to call Ruto an ICC alumni. They voted for the ICC alumni, and the country went into complete chaos. Why the people were rising up is because there's a huge population of employed, of educated Kenyan youths who are unemployed. On the other side, we are seeing opulence. We are seeing the government mismanage resources. We are seeing them abuse human rights, because those demolitions were an absolute violation of human rights. People would come from work to find their houses demolished. Absolutely no notice, no care or concern about where you are going to go. And as young people, we are feeling like this should not be the kind of government we live in present Africa. I think this violation of human rights have been normalized for a very long time in the African continent, that our lives do not mean much. Even as we go to protest, we would be killed and it's fine. I think the thing I love about the upcoming generations of Africans, of Kenyans, are Africans that are rising to defend their sovereignty at a personal level and at community level, at country level and at continental level. The finance bill protest was successful because of pushing for the implementation of our Kenyan constitution. Article 1 says that all sovereign power belongs to the Kenyan people. And that was like the heartbeat of the movement. That was like the thing that really drove us to continue protesting, to call out these government representatives that are disrespecting us. And I think now, in terms of social movements in Africa, we have to build an African movement, or rather solidarity within the African movements that are founded on ideology. Our movements have to be ideological, that are founded on the values that we want to see in the kind of Africa we want to live in. I think we have the advantage of being the majority. We are young, and Africa is young today. And Africa has been impoverished for a very long time. Yet we know very well that we are a rich continent. We have all of this mineral wealth. We have all of this human resource wealth, but we continue to live impoverished life. I think we need to decide that this ends with us, that we shall no longer keep complaining about our wealth and being stolen by a few rich people who find ways to divide us over and over again. I think we need to decide it ends with us, build solidarity amongst each other. We have not been successful in consolidating the gains of the Gen Z protests in terms of organizations, but I feel like we have been successful in dismantling tribalism, which was one of the things that politicians were using to win in elections. People would vie according to the tribe that they are mobilized according to their tribe, but we are coming and saying, when we go to hospital, we are not asked which tribe we come from. When things are going bad in the education sector, they don't go bad for a single tribe. So we are tribeless. And this was one of the things we were saying during the protest. We are partyless, we are tribeless, we are leaderless. leaderless are proven to be a challenge because it becomes difficult to consolidate the gains of the movement. And I think we're also learning from each other. We are seeing how best do we consolidate the Gen Z movement in such a way that we are actually continuing the fight for a better country in terms of taking political power, because we have to take political power for social change. We have to be able to have these systems, and we have to do it en masse. It has to be many young people in parliament, for example, so that whoever is at the top, if they do not uphold the constitution, if they do not uphold human rights and the rule of law, the parliament can easily vote them out. So that is a challenge we continue to have, especially given that elections in Kenya are coming up in the next 2 years. We can see Ruto has started consolidating. And in fact, I was having a conversation today with a colleague who was asking me, what are you guys doing as the Gen Z? Ruto is back. He's doing his campaign tours already. What is the Gen Z doing? We keep saying Ruto must go, but what are we doing? So Ruto goes. So that was a challenge. And I kept thinking about it. And yeah, what are we actually doing so Ruto actually goes? We need to hit the ground and organize against him. We need to have a candidate that we are all going to rally behind. So I think social movements are powerful movements to bring about social change. I personally think they are the driving force to social change, despite the many challenges that movements face. For example, I am part of the social justice movement in Kenya. I think it was one of the most powerful movements this country has ever seen. Being based in Nairobi, in Kisumu, across the country. But we experienced the challenge of financing. One embassy gave the movement 75 million and things went haywire. Everything that is wrong with the society that we are trying to fight found itself in the movement that was so vibrant, so radical, so inspiring, that was home. And yeah, it's been a challenge even trying to bring the movement back again, because I think people felt really betrayed, people felt heartbroken, people's hopes were shattered. It's still a challenge, but now we have the Gen Z movement that we could organize around. And I think we still need the movements that are rooted in the grassroots, the social justice centers. And I think this is a good organizing strategy, even for maybe our comrades in Tanzania, in Zimbabwe, that we are having community centers where people meet there regularly. For example, in Marre Social Justice Center, we have community meetings every Saturday at 2 p.m. Community members come, raise any community issues that happen during that week. For example, right now we are discussing evictions. The president wants to build affordable houses again after demolishing our houses, wants now the land. So we are discussing how we are going to tackle this looming evictions, which is land grabbing and another violation of our rights. We already have a case in court with the Law Society of Kenya about the evictions that happened last year and the demolitions and the floods that the government really just neglected the people. But I think we are going to have a mass action to reject the plan to have affordable housing in Mathare, because really it's just these guys grabbing our land and building houses that will not be given to us. They don't care where people go. They don't care. Mathare has been home for more than 20 years, has been home for some of the people whose land was taken away by the British and they had to come and stay in Mathare. They have nowhere else to go. So these are some of the discussions we're having right now at our Saturday community meetings at 2 p.m. We also get to sing together, which cements our solidarity. I love our Saturday meetings. They're very nice. So maybe we need to center our organizing at that grassroots level, and then somehow it spills over to the national organizing and international, I think, continental organizing. Yeah. Because oh, sorry, am I speaking too much? My apologies.
No, I'll ask you to wrap up, but for a completely different reason that I would say.
Yes.
So please go ahead and wrap up.
All right. Yeah. So I think in conclusion, we say Kenya ni home. Kenya ni nyumbani. And in this webinar, we have to say Africa is home, Africa is nyumbani, and nyumbani must feel like nyumbani. We must feel safe, we must feel comfortable, we must enjoy dignity, because there's absolutely no way all of this world is ours and we are still wallowing in poverty. It is unacceptable. So I think it's a challenge to us as youth to figure out creative ways to organize, to bring about the much needed social change, because we can do it, we have the numbers. We just need to figure out, to bring about creativity in organizing for social change. Thank you very much.
A drum roll for you, Wanjira. I was laughing and saying I needed to stop you because you are touching on everything that we want to go into in depth in the Baraza conversations that we are having. So I was beginning to worry a little bit that we are already satisfying people's hunger to engage in this. But thank you for touching on issues to do with the importance of us uniting as movements and bridging the false divides around tribe. You said your movement said we are tribeless, we are leaderless, but also even raising the contradictions that then emerged for your movement when you started to see that if we are leaderless, maybe it's difficult for us to consolidate our gains and maybe have a clear purpose and vision that we pursue. And you've also raised things to do with how do movements deal with this question of political power and people who become representatives, whether you are elected as councillors, as members of parliament. But most importantly, you also even started to share experiences around what you have seen working at the level of organizing. When you are saying every Saturday, 2 p.m., people, it's not only that they are meeting, but they are meeting to discuss what they've experienced in the past week, what emerges, what's important, what's significant, what matters to us as citizens. That's an interesting model, and you're already offering that as a lesson to not just comrades in Zimbabwe, but in other places. So I'm so inspired by what you had to share, and I know these are things that we are going to have to dig much deeper into in the course of our forthcoming Baraza conversation. So thank you again, Wanjira, for what you shared. We want to move on to my dear sister and comrade, Diakhoumba, who is here with us. It's very difficult to introduce her and say exactly who Diakhoumba is, because I connect to her mostly as a comrade and as a sister. But for us to be able to do some of the work that we are doing, it also takes certain enabling factors. And Diakhoumba has been one of those who's been able to use her privileged access to certain spaces to mobilize. In Shona, we say zvikwanisiro, but it's enablers for us to then be able to organize as movements, to be able to build the movements, to be able to come together the way that we are coming. So she's a co-conspirator at the level of ideas, but also at the level of material enablements for us to be able to do this. So Diakhoumba, over to you. Speak to us.
Merci beaucoup, Brix. Brix, est-ce que tu peux me dire de combien de temps je dispose?
If you can speak for 5 to 7 minutes.
C'est parfait. Je vais, comme vous pouvez l'entendre, m'exprimer en français. Tout d'abord, m'excuser du bruit que vous allez entendre parce qu'on a demandé qu'on se présente. L'une de mes premières identités depuis 4 ans et demi, c'est d'être maman. Et ici, je suis en train d'amener un des futurs libérateurs de l'Afrique à l'école. Je suis tellement heureuse d'avoir pu écouter les intervenants qui ont commencé avant moi, parce que ce soit notre sœur qui travaille qui lutte sur l'environnement, dans le poumon, le deuxième poumon mondial, ma sœur. Et que ce soit Anissa qui a expliqué comment un mouvement complètement local a généré des fonds que certains d'entre nous qui travaillons dans la philanthropie désormais n'auraient jamais rêvé de pouvoir destiner à une cause aussi importante que la volonté du peuple kényan. Je pense qu'il est très important pour nous tous de réaliser qu'il y a des adages sur notre continent qui ont une force encore plus grande que celle qu'on pensait qu'ils avaient. On dit chez moi, au Sénégal, en Casamance, dans le sud, Tidiane est là pour contrôler, que le chemin pour aller quelque part est aussi important que la destination. Cet appel aujourd'hui est celui auquel j'ai participé et ceux auxquels vous avez participé, certains d'entre vous avant ça, sont des moments critiques parce qu'ils nous permettent de voir qu'une conférence n'est qu'une conférence. Ce qui est important, c'est le mouvement dans lequel nous sommes. Je suis en train de parler, chut. Le mouvement dans lequel nous sommes n'est pas un nouveau mouvement. BRICS a amené dans cet espace, l'esprit de notre camarade Ever Joyce. Les camarades de RDC sauront, excusez-moi, comme vous pouvez voir, quelqu'un a beaucoup de choses à dire. Les camarades de RDC sont là pour vous dire qu'il y a aussi l'esprit d'autres camarades comme Fred de la Lucha, lâchement assassiné. Nous avons des camarades dans tout le continent qui ont payé de leur vie, qui ont payé de leur santé mentale, Anifa nous en a parlé, qui ont payé de leur capacité économique. Notre camarade Tidiane nous a parlé de Y en a marre, en ayant cette humilité africaine de ne pas nous dire ce qui s'est passé après le mouvement du 23 juin, ce qui s'est passé après que nos camarades de Y en a marre nous aient portés en tant que Sénégalaises et Sénégalaises vers la liberté, enfin celle qu'on pensait à l'époque. La plupart d'entre eux qui étaient employés ont perdu leur emploi. La plupart d'entre eux qui dépendaient de l'un ou de l'autre ont perdu des opportunités. Il a été extrêmement difficile pour ces personnes de rester dans la lutte. Et pourquoi je parle de ça? C'est pour vous dire que moi, ce que j'espère à Accra et après, c'est que ce soit un espace où on puisse connaître les vraies réalités du militantisme, quel qu'il soit. Le militantisme environnemental, le militantisme de la santé de la reproduction, le militantisme de la justice sociale, le militantisme des droits socio-économiques que notre camarade du Kenya, Wanjiru, vient de discuter. Tous ces militantismes nécessitent les autres. Pour moi, l'important à Accra et au-delà d'Accra, c'est de nous assurer que quand nous nous réunissons, les voix soient diverses, que personne ne parle au nom de personne. Merci à notre sœur d'avoir rappelé la situation du Mozambique. La situation du Mozambique, comme de beaucoup de pays, le Sahel, l'Afrique lusophone, vous savez ce qui se passe aujourd'hui en Guinée-Bissau, dans plein d'endroits, n'arrive pas à nos forums panafricains, de temps en temps n'arrive même pas aux forums sous-régionaux et encore moins aux forums mondiaux. Ce que moi j'espère que nous verrons à Accra, c'est un endroit pour les défenseurs et les défenseuses, par les défenseurs et les défenseuses. C'est que toutes ces causes oubliées, toutes ces identités criminalisées puissent venir nous dire à nous, toute l'Afrique réunie. J'ai mis au défi BRICS et ses collègues de s'assurer que dans cette salle, tous les pays d'Afrique soient représentés. La dernière fois, j'ai demandé à nos camarades de la diaspora de ne pas se sentir comme des invités. Ils sont la 6e région de l'Afrique. Et si tout est disons que c'est panafricain, toute la diaspora doit être présente. Pour moi, le sujet ou en tout cas les objectifs de la réunion en termes thématiques, c'est vraiment de s'assurer qu'il y ait un agenda qui n'oublie personne. Et que, comme l'a dit Fadel Barro au dernier appel, que ce ne soit pas un espace où on réplique ce que nous dénonçons. L'une de nos sœurs qui a parlé avant moi a expliqué comment, je crois que c'est Hanifa, a expliqué comment, oui, c'était formidable de réunir tout cet argent, mais il fallait appliquer des valeurs qui sont celles de tous nos mouvements. Nous avons des valeurs communes qui sont à notre disposition. Et si vous vous demandez de quoi je parle, si la traduction fait que vous ne comprenez pas cette Sénégalaise à l'accent français, c'est comment allons-nous nous assurer qu'à Accra, au-delà et pour toujours, tout ce qui a un isme et qui est négatif, et tout ce qui a un phobia et qui est négatif, une phobie, que nous les tenions ensemble loin de notre solidarité transnationale. Le moment que vous entendez dans les médias, sur LinkedIn, partout, qui en fait parle de ce qui se passe dans le Nord, est un incroyable moment pour le renouveau de notre continent, pour le renouveau de nos luttes diverses et variées. Il y a un nouvel ordre mondial qui est en train de se créer, au sein duquel l'Afrique peut jouer son rôle. Notre rôle, et vous voyez que je m'inclus, je vous expliquerai pourquoi, notre rôle qui est celui d'Africains et d'Africaines conscientisés, et d'aider ces jeunes personnes qui ont été décriées par notre sœur du Zimbabwe, qui ne se sentent pas concernées. Je pense que du privilège d'où nous nous asseyons, d'avoir été des gens qui ont été à l'école, qui pour la plupart sur cet appel, je crois que j'avais compté 150 personnes, j'en vois 129 maintenant, pour la plupart, nous n'avons pas vraiment souffert de la faim. Pour la plupart, nous sommes ici en ligne. Ça veut dire que nous avons accès à une sorte de technologie. Ne jugeons pas les personnes qui n'ont pas cette chance. Au contraire, mettons-les au centre de notre lutte et assurons-nous que nous n'ayons pas à parler au nom des gens, mais pour les gens, avec les gens. Et je pense que l'expérience de Lucha, l'expérience de nos camarades de République centrafricaine, du Tchad, tous ces mouvements sociaux qui se sont levés, ont balayé au Burkina beaucoup de personnes, le balai a servi et le balai a quasiment dû être rangé. Parce que une fois les détenteurs de pouvoir qui refusaient de partir partis, il y a eu un vide que les mouvements sociaux ont eu à remplir. J'ai vu les camarades de Lucha, j'ai vu les camarades de Y'en a marre se lever pour des questions socio-économiques du quotidien de leur population. Et ça, c'est très important. Mais je pense que ce que Accra représente, pour nous tous, et devrait représenter, c'est l'opportunité pour chacun et chacune d'entre nous de se rendre compte que nous portons tous en nous des préjugés. Ceux d'entre nous qui se pensent religieux ont besoin de comprendre quel est le danger des fondamentalismes religieux arrivés au pouvoir dans nos pays. Le Sénégal est un cas d'espèce. Les personnes qui pensent que les théories du genre, le féminisme et les choses comme ça ne sont pas une priorité, ont besoin de se rendre compte de la force des mouvements et de l'expérience des mouvements que ces populations représentent. Nos collègues que nous n'entendons vraiment pas parce que nous ne leur donnons pas la place du mouvement des personnes vivant avec un handicap. Les questions que nous avons laissées être oubliées parce qu'il y avait un dictat des personnes qui vous finançaient ou vous financent encore et décident depuis Menlo Park où je me trouve, Paris et d'ici et d'autres endroits de l'Europe, de ce qui est important pour les Africains. J'ai pris un peu plus de temps que je voulais, mais c'était très important pour moi de vous inviter à Accra, à venir avec une conscience ouverte pour pouvoir entendre ce que nous n'entendons pas, parce que certaines personnes s'assurent que nous n'entendions pas. Mais surtout pour pouvoir être en communauté de personnes qui luttent au quotidien à leur niveau avec les moyens qu'ils ont sans aucun jugement pour une Afrique digne des Africains. Les Africains ont tout ce qu'il faut et les Africains, ça fait longtemps qu'ils se lèvent, ça fait longtemps qu'ils réussissent et accomplissent des miracles. Aujourd'hui, comme disent les anglophones, le level playing field est là. Il faut qu'on le saisisse et moi, je veux m'engager au nom de moi-même, malheureusement, je ne suis pas encore présidente de quoi que ce soit, mais au nom de moi-même, je veux m'engager auprès de vous, comme je l'ai fait lors du dernier appel, à m'assurer de trouver toutes les petites niches et poches de ressources pour m'assurer que, pour que vous ayez cette assurance de ne pas devoir, en plus de faire attention à vos vies, de ne pas devoir, en plus de tenir vos organisations, pour ceux qui ont des organisations vivantes, que vous n'ayez pas à vous inquiéter de la disponibilité de fonds. Est-ce qu'il y a des fonds en ce moment pour ce genre d'initiative que nous avons appuyé moi-même, les collègues de Ford et d'autres? Probablement pas. Mais on les trouvera. On a, quelqu'un l'a mentionné, le forum des philanthropes africains. Il y a des Africains riches. Après, il y aura un débat que j'aimerais qu'on ait à Accra sur l'origine de l'argent. Mais l'important, c'est que je veux que vous sachiez que ce qui se passe sur cet appel est en route pour Accra. C'est déjà la révolution que nous avons héritée de nos pères et de nos mères fondatrices. Le fait que je puisse m'exprimer en français ici avec vous est déjà une chance de voir que nous ne laisserons rien ni personne nous empêcher de contribuer selon nos moyens à cette Afrique qui n'est ni agiste, ni sexiste, ni, je manque des choses, ni xénophobe, ni transphobe, ni LGBTophobe. Nous allons réussir parce que nous allons être ensemble. Je vous remercie et Brix, excuse-moi, tu sais que j'aime parler.
Drum roll for you, Diakhoumba. Thank you so much. There's so much that just fires us up. Hey, Malik, how are you? So good to see you. That's the next generation. Yeah, so thank you so much. I wanted to just share with comrades how Diakhoumba, this point you raised to say we must be as diverse as possible when we meet. And you also say that no one should speak on behalf of the other. This is something that you have passionately brought up in our different conversations. And you have even encouraged us to say, can we be a reflection of our African Union when we gather in Accra, so that if we want to hear about Somalia, there's someone from Somalia. Chad, there's someone from Chad. Mozambique, there's someone from Mozambique. So it's an extremely high bar, but it's something that we are, striving towards. And hopefully we'll hit 80%, if not 85%, in this particular iteration. But we'll keep working towards making sure that we are as diverse and as inclusive as we can be. But I also wanted to just highlight the point you raised around the conversation on resources when you were talking about what we saw in the Kenyan example, but even also your own commitment around making sure that organizers, movements, collectives have the minimum that can enable them to survive, to keep working and all of that. So we are actually going to be having some of these conversations in great detail when we meet in Accra. We have people who've done research. We have a whole track that's actually going to be looking at what is research telling us when we start to look at resourcing movements. What are movements able to do before the funding? So those are all the things that are going to be part of our conversation. So thanks so much for bringing all of that. Again, these are just teasers. We are going to be going into the main meal when we meet in Accra. At this stage, I would like to, can I just come back to you, Pumi, to guide us on concluding?
Absolutely, Comrade Briggs. You know, we started off with Bob Marley saying Africa unite. And Diakhoumba says we can only do this if we challenge our prejudices and make sure that there is no Anglophone domination in Accra and make sure that every country is there. We are working towards that. We are excited. 24 days from today, we will be in Accra. And Comrade Ogo is just going to come in shortly, but we invite you to look at the socials, to look at the registration. I understand it closes tomorrow. to find information that we are really making sure that we share it widely and make sure that you also share it widely. But Comrade Ogo, a quick one on just a few things on how we are, our state of preparedness.
Thank you so much, Pumi, and a huge thank you to all our panelists for their inspiring conversations and thought-provoking insights. So just a couple of announcements. As Pumi has shared with us, registration for sponsorship participants is now closed. We are hoping to share by Friday feedback on successful participants. We would have loved to sponsor everyone, but there are limited resources. So by Friday, you would get feedback on if your application has been successful. Self-funded registration is still open, but will close by the close of business tomorrow, Friday. So we encourage everyone who hasn't registered to please register at www.asmbaraza.org. In terms of visa support, I'm aware that a majority or a few of us will need visas to travel to Ghana. So we are providing official invitation letters to assist with visa applications. Please reach out to us if you need an invitation letter on info@asmbaraza.org. Coms, please, can you type that in the chat so that colleagues can have that email address? We have a power-packed program ready for everyone, and that program will be shared in the coming days. There is also an incredible lineup of artists from across Africa, bringing music, poetry, and visual storytelling into the Baraza experience. We also have field visits to, I think, around 4 different locations where participants will be able to engage directly with some of these locations across Accra. In terms of safeguarding, Namatai has been quite profound this afternoon on how movements have to be safeguarded, and we are really taking this very seriously. For us, safeguarding is a priority, and as highlighted in today's discussion, security is important for us, and we recognize the risks that many may face in their advocacy work. In light of this, like I shared in the last webinar, we will not be sharing certain sensitive details around the Baraza with everyone. It will only be shared with participants who have registered. So once you have registered, we have your details and you will receive communication from us. Wellness is also a big thing for us. We know that movement work is really demanding, and this year's Baraza, we have included a dedicated, well-being and care aspect of the Baraza, where we would have spaces for rest, for reflection, and even also support as we go through this process together. Also, like Pumi has shared, please follow our socials on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. It's at ASM Baraza on all the platforms. And I think that's it from me, and I'll pass it over to Pumi.
Thank you so much, Ogo. Thank you so much love expressed to all of the speakers and recognizing the struggles that each one of you is engaged in, but also a loud call to think about how we as movements are going to do better in relation to rebuilding, rethinking the Africa that we want, that is safe, violence-free, but also so many questions raised. I remember when BRICS was stopping Wanjira to say that some of these discussions are exactly what the program in Accra is inviting from all of us. Thank you, everybody. And BRICS, your last words at the top of the hour.
You have said them for me. No further words from me.
Thank you, comrades. Let's keep organizing. Let's see each other in Accra. We recognize not everyone will be there, but we'll find ways to connect and follow the socials throughout the days in Accra, but knowing that this is just a moment of coming together and building, but the struggle continues beyond, and we will remain connected to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a lovely evening, a lovely day for those that are just waking up, and a good preparation for a very needed and much promising moment for building the power of movements. Goodbye, good night, good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.